Thank you. There we go.
Is there any understanding of protocol about undisclosed recording using OBS?
I don't, OBS refers to,
Video tool.
The something broadcasting system. I forget what the O stands for. It's a
Open.
downloadable
Open.
broadcasting system, a free broadcasting suite, which you can record anything on your computer, period. A window or anything, not using the Zoom's built-in system.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's what I use to build those gems. I use OBS and I screen capture the actual video. And you could do response videos. If you've seen response videos, that's typically the software that people are using unless they got something more professional.
But what I mean is ethically, without disclosing it.
That question's been asked a lot of times.
Yeah, does it have an answer in GCC?
Yes and no, maybe.
So no answer, no definitive answer.
It may
No.
depend on who you ask.
I've actually been thinking a lot about that because I've been feeling like anything that I say, that's my word, it's out there. I don't have a problem with that. But the way it's put together and edited, I think the individual should have a right to view it first before it's put out there. And at least state their case of why it's an unfair representation.
That's why I always put the full record, not snipped out.
Exactly, yeah.
Sam, just a question. I'm seeing the Dusan Andrusek post that you did on Facebook as pinned, like it's coming up as the first post on Global Challenges.
The
Like
Russian
that,
woman? Yes.
yeah, like that other one.
Yes.
And that pinning effect, the challenge with that pinning effect is that anytime somebody goes to Global Challenges, instead of seeing latest post in the post thread, they're going to see that and maybe they scroll down past it, maybe they don't.
Yep.
Do you know how the pinning is happening? Because I don't.
Yes, I pinned it. And that happens with every pinned announcement, by the way. So if we have any pinned announcement, that will by default happen. And
Okay.
there are several posts that are designated pinned posts, but only one of them shows up at the top. And then the regular postings happen after that. So if we don't want that behavior, then we have to get rid of all the pinned posts. Now, throughout the life of GCC, we've always had one post, which is, here's the weekly schedule, okay? So that used to happen all the time anyway. It's
Right.
just that the most recent pinned announcement is the one that always shows up first when you go to the home of GCC by default. So if we want to eliminate that behavior, we have to eliminate all the pinned announcements.
Why can't we just request that there be a meeting of the minds on what gets pinned before somebody pins it?
Because we didn't have that protocol or agreement. So everybody was willy-nilly pinning posts, throughout the life of this. And so that begs the question, do we want that? Do we want that agreement? Do we want that protocol?
I would like lobby for no pin unless deliberately, offered as something to pin. So the default is not to pin.
Well, it used to be the case that everybody was asking, where's the link to the session? Where's the link to the session? Where's the link to the session?
Right. Yeah, but
By
right now
default.
that's not what's getting pinned. So
Well, it
as
is
long-
pinned. It's just behind some of these others.
But if we don't have the others, it'll just be that. And it seems that we all agree that should probably be there.
yeah,
Could do
I
that.
wouldn't mind if that was pinned and that's the only thing that is pinned.
Okay, let me put that at the top then.
And somehow I think when you post in particular, your posting is default set to pin. So
Not the case.
on-
Not the case.
That's
I
not the case.
specifically intentionally pin those posts that are pinned.
Okay. So yeah, my preference would be, to not do that in favor of the thing refreshing to whoever posted last as sort of a principle and default.
Let me go to the announcements. Let me go find the right post. By the way, some of these other posts are the summaries of, what this thing is really about. So if we don't pin that, then it'll be harder to find those. There's another one that's also a request for donations. There's another one that is the list of the playlist for all the public videos. Okay, so let me find the actual schedule one. Okay, here we go. Yes.
And Barry, you're correct. When you rewatch, I rewatched yesterday's call, it does not show our names. Which I'm
Yeah.
actually okay with. I think I like that because I don't know how many people are watching, but I think most of the people watching, they either know who we are or they know who to ask to find out who was that person. And that's good. That's good enough for me. I prefer that.
YouTube does tell you the number of views, but not who they are.
No, but I'm saying that, I'm okay. I don't need to have my name up there for some random stranger somewhere.
My problem was when I first
Yes.
joined, I didn't know anybody. And so
Hey,
I
hey.
didn't know anybody's name.
Go ahead, Sam.
Can you give me a few hours to do this? Because I want to collect the list of posts that I think are reasonable first posts. I'm going to put that set of links separately, and then I'll unannounce all of them and then just put one of them up there. And I want at least some other mechanism to point to all this introductory material.
Yeah, no
Give
problem.
me a
Understood.
few hours to do that, okay?
Okay.
It'll take a few hours to take a shower. Anyway.
Not a worry.
Are you leaving now, Sam? Because I kind of want you to be here.
I will leave as well soon to go take a shower because it's been a couple of days. That's my confession. I don't take a shower every day during COVID now.
Yeah.
Okay, I will listen with rapt attention while you introduce the first share.
Doug, you let me know when to start.
Doug might be making this announcement.
I think well, I already made my announcements, but now I can't see them because I'm seeing all the pinned announcements rather than posts. But that's okay. It's not a big deal. It'll sort itself out over time. So, Stacy.
Okay. So yesterday we had a really interesting call that I went back and I looked at. And I want to bring up something that wasn't discussed. So what Sam said is that his intention for the calls, and correct me if I am not stating this correctly, Sam, was to show up here and to do ourselves better. Okay, so I just want to bring up something that happened. When I watched the call, I noticed that 5 different times I used the wrong vocabulary word. And it made what I was saying not really make sense. And yet nobody stopped me or questioned me once. So what that led me to believe is either they weren't listening to what I was really saying and they just let it go by, or they did notice it, but something stopped them from either questioning me or saying, is that what you mean? Because it didn't make sense. And I think that's really important. So I kind of want to throw that out to find out why. Because that, to me, that's part of doing ourselves better too, being able to hear and understand.
Was it the same word 5 times or 5 different words?
The same word. I used the word arbitrary.
Arbitrary?
I used it a number of times. It was tied to the second definition of arbitrary. What I was really trying to explain is if it were something that were out of our hands that just happened, so that it would be equal justice for all of the players. And I used the word arbitrary, but I didn't mean arbitrary.
What did
In
you mean?
software, you say that's a default configuration.
Okay, thank you.
But the thing is you got to be aware of the configuration, or it's just an unknown skill.
Okay, but the point I'm trying to make is that I was trying to explain, or I was trying to describe what it would be like if the computer took an action based on somebody doing something.
Okay.
And I was trying to say that if we put that in the hands of the computer and then had a human who was able to override that, that would make us all conscious of our own behavior, because we would know if we do A, B, or C, the computer might mute us. It's not so much about the idea I want to talk about. It's about the fact that I used a word that made no sense and nobody stopped me to inquire what I was talking about.
Did you use it in the context of something is arbitrary and capricious, meaning it doesn't have a good explanation why that happened?
That when I was saying it, I was using it in the way of that the power was like the second definition for arbitrary is like unreigned and unreigned power. And I was using it in the way, what made me think of that word is I was just thinking that it's out of my hands. Nobody could blame me for muting Barry because I didn't mute Barry, the computer did. Again, I want to hear what Sam has to say, but I'm talking this isn't about the word arbitrary or the point I was trying to make. It's about a situation where somebody says something that may or may not make sense and nobody inquires into it and it just passes by. Sam?
Might it be possible that it made complete sense? And you're ascribing shall I say, a level of inattention that may not actually be true.
It might be possible.
So I believe I understood your point quite fully, and I believe Colin did as well, because I agree with his substitution of the word default for arbitrary. So I think the gist of your intended message was fully landed, at least with two of us,
Okay.
probably more.
Well, that's
So I'm
good.
curious then why you might go towards, hey, these people didn't pay attention. Why did your mind go there?
Okay, because I'm trying to look at some of the other areas other than the ones that we keep bringing up and rehashing. And, we say, I think it's like the 3 questions, is it true? Do we know it's true? Whatever those are. There were certain statements, and I took notes, which is what I told you I wanted to talk to you about later, that people said, and I'm just looking to just question things. For example, when you said that we come here because we should be coming with our best selves, I don't feel that way at all. I mean, I always want to be my best self, but I actually come here trying to be as real as possible, because I don't want to wear a mask and I don't want to be with other people wearing a mask. So to me, trying to show ourselves any differently than we actually are is a disservice. I'd rather see the real thing so that we can deal with the real thing. Go right ahead.
I know Colin's got his hand up and so does Alex, so I'm just cautiously just putting my hand up also.
I can't make an arbitrary decision without influence from my emotional aspect, but I'll second your connotations.
Colin, did you want to go?
Sure. this is a topic that I've thought about. It's what I call getting ready. So if you're just spitballing, you're just kind of, you know, in wayfinding mode, mind map mode. You know, what do you think of this? You know, could your emotions help my journey map? That kind of thing. It's a draft. It's not finished. So if somebody doesn't understand you, it's a sign of respect if they say, "Hey, look, I don't understand you." And Sam said to me the other day that whatever you just said was a stream of consciousness. I didn't get that. He said that to Glenn too. I assume he understands some things, but he might be using a higher level to measure. And being a speaker who has presented many things, Sam has a way of, I think, realizing if something is well presented or if it's a labored thought. And a lot of my thoughts are labored because they're kind of not necessarily in the right order. An example is if I have a sentence, a lot of times if I'm in typing it, the sentence will reverse and the comma will disappear. The knots will turn into positives. And you know, you edit that sentence. But if I'm talking straight, you're going to get all the commas and knots and all that garbled stuff. So am I ready to speak? Heiner says, no, be quiet. You're not ready. So, you know, I respect that too. But we're trying to get ready. So it is a sign of respect for someone to feedback, say, hey, Stacy, what do you mean by arbitrary? But depending on the day, somebody might say you're interrupting. And if you make 5 more points, you know, am I going to stop the flow to pick apart arbitrary? So really it's your responsibility to look over your own message and make your own message better. Take your spelling mistakes out, restate things over and over again if you think they're important, try to be concise. So yeah, I think the idea of getting ready is a self-reflection, not a reflection on somebody else. I can say, are you ready, as a friend to you? But really, I think the best question is you'd ask yourself, am I ready? So that's what I meant by that. And this is stuff that I've said over and over and over again. Anyway, I'll stop, but that's a really good point about getting ready and having that piece produced, taken out of a video as a gem. You know, that's the same thing. If I do that, am I speaking about somebody who's not present or speaking about somebody who was present but not present now? It gets really hairy when you start to get into the continued conversation aspect and that trust level and who wants to hear from you. There's a lot of things at play. And I think if we bring our authentic selves, like Sam is saying, it should converge to higher quality, which is what I'm trying to get through to Heiner. I got a whole bunch of digs on Heiner about higher quality because I figure he says, what do you mean? He says, I've never heard anybody say that they're talking to make higher quality in a conversation. And I don't know if he means my feedback to him, or I don't know what he means by that. But if we're not adding higher quality or trying to, we're not bringing our best selves. So I really need to talk to Heiner about what he meant by he's never heard anybody say the reason that he interrupted was because he wants to bring higher quality. Like, Stacy, what did you mean by, you know, that word? Did I hire the quality or did I raise it? Did I interrupt you or did I not? It all depends on the format that we've agreed to talk and what's considered polite in the company you're in. And that's reading the room.
So I'd like to stop you just because you're on a roll and Heiner raised his hand.
I think my hand is up
And
before Heiner's.
and actually, no, Heiner's was up before you. And I'd like to.
I raised it way along.
Okay, well, I
Well,
missed it.
Heiner's
So
going first.
I missed it. So Heiner's going first. And I'd just like to ask that there is awareness of that dimension of this space. So if everybody's paying attention, and Colin, I got to tell you, not being on camera, it sort of diminishes, on one hand, our ability to know whether you're present and accounted for consistently or not, number one. And number two, my inclination to treat you fair, equally with others that are on camera, because it's sort of an increase in privilege entitlement for people that show up fully. And not being on camera is sort of a half an appearance. But with that said, Heiner, you've got your hand up, and then Sam.
Okay, I respond, but I wanted to actually respond to Stacy. First, Colin, when I had asked you, why do you interrupt me all the time? Because then I cannot complete my full sentence, and my full sentence makes a meaning, not a certain word. Then you said, I have to add quality, you yourself. And also with the shut up, I corrected it various times. I said in a group of people, when they cannot communicate, maybe they shut up, this comedian said. So never cite out of context. What I wanted to go to is Stacy. Stacy, I find your question or your remark that you maybe used the wrong word, I found it very, very interesting. I think I use the wrong words most of the time. And for me, meaning is the whole fabric, not just the network, but the situation of all the words in context. Which situation? I spoke about the lexic. I look like very often for the adjective and the reference. So meaning is a construct having to do with semantics and is very, very situational. So to take one word out of context or try to find meanings, go to a dictionary, you find 20 antonyms, synonyms, whatever connections to that word certain people might have. The Romans said the most important thing about any word is how you understand it. But we have to come here to how we understand it jointly. And I had this discussion with Barry recently. What is a map? Because here many people have heard about Tony Busan and the mind map. For me, it is not a real map. The English of map is very like a universal, meaningless term. There are, for me and Barry, mathematical networks and maps, and there are concrete maps at a certain scale with a legend for a certain purpose with clear symbols. The Tony Busan mind map was a nice approach 25 years ago, but it really showed that his approach is very, how do you say, fashionable and feasible, and many people like it. But all this struggling with words and images without getting the other senses and aspects in the meaning is wrong. Then we have a split in society, the people educated in words and the other people educated in images, and we have to bring that together. And that is a purpose of my session here. In the religious wars, we had it not only about the Catholic and the Protestant and the Byzantic or Islamic people, but also with the Bilderstreit. So the banning of images or the banning of words or other kind of cultural expression, there the evil starts. We have to really try to bring it together. So please always try to get my meaning between the words, and I always use the wrong ones.
Theo?
Yes, Heiner, I definitely agree with you. I want to go back to 2 points I think that I heard Stacy make. One is this word notion and whether or not the larger message was actually delivered. And you were asking why, your offering was not interrupted for clarification. And I think it's exactly the point that Heiner made. In other words, there's always a judgment going on here with regard to what I'm hearing, in that is there something here that is slightly off, whatever off means in my own mind, and is it important enough to interrupt the speaker, or do I still get the gist of what the speaker is saying so that I can let it go, And then we can actually address the offness later on, or maybe even just let it slide, okay? And in that case, there was very little offness, and I just let it slide because I felt I got the main message of it. So that was point number one. Point number two, I was actually a little bit surprised that you used the word best and authentic, or good and authentic, as different. So I thought that curious. You know, why wouldn't authentic be good? Why wouldn't authentic be the best? Or why wouldn't best be the authentic, et cetera, you know, with all those plays on words. And again, those specific nuances may not be important so long as we understand the main gist of what I or you are trying to say. So that's why I say these words are definitely stumbling blocks. And that's why I put kind of as an exercise / game, this Dictopedia word spreadsheet together. And Barry's been playing quite a bit. I think Barry's got probably half the definitions in that spreadsheet right now. He's been very active. But I do think that having multiple definitions for things, words and phrases, is a way for us to understand each other, is a way for us to invite those potential conversations about what those differences are. And if not, then just let them sit and just be aware that, hey, Barry means this when he says that, and Colin means this when he says that, and you mean this when you, and maybe a conversation is not necessary as long as there's already this reference that's available, so that I don't think, oh, this definition does not apply to Barry, so I better not use it this way, right? So that already is kind of a useful thing if we study it. So anyway, just those 2 points. Thank you, and I'm off to take a shower.
Barry, can I respond first before Sam? Is
Stacy,
that all right with you?
yeah, Stacy, you're next, and then Barry.
Okay, thank you. Where's Sam? Wait, let me put back on my gallery view. So is one of the things that Doug's done, Barry's done, you've done too, Sam, that I've found very helpful is when I hear people say, so wait, what I hear you saying is, and then rephrase it to get confirmation. And I think that's really helpful, not just with me, but when it happens with other people too. I don't know what that means. You're muted, and I don't know what that means.
Sorry, that was meant to be all around the room with everyone, not just not just one-on-one.
Oh, okay. So that's the first thing, is that I agree. You don't interrupt just to say you used the wrong word, especially if it feels like everybody understands. But sometimes, I mean, I was able to notice when I look back that I was really struggling for words. I was having a really hard time finding the right word. And like I said, Doug's done it many times. You've done that, Barry's done that, where you kind of come in and help the person and say, so am I correct in hearing that you mean A, B, and C? And then the person can qualify that. To the second part of what you asked, the best and authentic, that is a whole conversation that I definitely want to have. Because yes, there are distinctions there, and I would love for Doug to be part of that conversation too. And I've been dreaming of it in my mind since yesterday. I'm complete.
Barry?
Yeah, I just want to say that how thrilled I am that Sam created this glossary page for two reasons. The first reason is that I know very well that I have a larger English language vocabulary than the average person, and especially for whom English is not their first language. And so I appreciate the opportunity to put in my definitions of words that I use, and also my understanding of the meaning of words I've heard other people use, which did not have a definition. And the other thing I noticed about the glossary are two things. Number one, the number of words for which there's an entry expecting a definition, but the definition is blank, has not been filled in. In some cases, Sam has suggested who should put in the definition, the person using the word, and sometimes there's nobody. And so one thing is that there are words that nobody has bothered to contribute a definition for. And then the other one is a word that is in there twice with two conflicting definitions or incompatible definitions. And so those two cases, the incompatible definitions and the missing definitions, are the two really valuable things for me. And what I would hope is valuable for others is where I contribute a definition, so somebody knows what I'm talking about if I use a word that's not in their everyday working vocabulary.
So if I can unpack something here, that the understood meaning of words, the level of individual clarity and the level of collective understanding and all of that stuff, for me, is the tip of the iceberg that's visible. Unpacking it, there's this huge mass below the surface that is independent of language, is independent of words and expression, verbal expression, that has to do with how I show up. And that is multifaceted and multidimensional. So if I'm coming empty, meaning open, and from curiosity, which is not just energetically present, but energetically interested, engaged in service to the person I'm listening to, it's going to be very different than if I show up predisposed or oriented toward being on guard or defensive or in judgment of, on a person-to-person connection and energetic level. And most, in the current cultural frame, most conversational contexts are not neutral, are not safe, are not oriented toward space and generosity and safety. So to the earlier thing about best self, showing up as best self, and interestingly enough, the divergence between the orientation, the perception, understanding of those two things, where Stacy sort of translated best self into putting on best face, sort of, acting our best, being on good behavior, not being comfortable and relaxed and 100% authentic, however that presents. Sam having it be synonymous with being authentic, like bringing the best of who I am to whatever the table is, as almost the default assumption, right? And how different those two things are intrinsically, rooted in the same word and expression, but it's in the mind eye of the beholder speaker what the meaning intention is. So my sort of curiosity and interest and sort of ongoing lived experience, experimental frame around all this is how to make explicit that part that's under the surface with and attach equal significance, value, and importance to it in terms of collective awareness understanding. Like, not just what do you think and what do you have to say, or what do you have to contribute, or whatever in terms of the stuff above the surface, but how are you? Where are you at? How do you feel in this space? Do you bring any triggers, tickles, wrinkles with you when you walk in the door that are there potentially to be triggered or buttons pushed or whatever? You know, that whole dimension of knowing somebody, or of somebody sharing and declaring where they're at with complete honesty and openness, and what the collective response to that is, value and orientation to that domain is of equal importance, if not more importance, than you know, the intellectual, the verbal, the artifacts, the ideas that are going back and forth and being shared. And with that, I'm complete. Sam? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, it takes me a while to find the unmute button. Okay, a lot has transpired, and I think this is a very rich conversation. So one point, I've probably got 4 or 5 points. I'll try to make it quick. Okay. In response to Heiner, I admire Heiner a lot because the rest of us here have a privilege that Heiner does not have. The privilege is English is our day-to-day language. It is not Heiner's day-to-day language. And if we're dealing more with people, let's say Glenn also, you know, who's Norwegian, and someone else, let's say from Toulouse, France, who may, you know, not speak either of those languages. So those of us who are very, very particular and precise with meanings of English words, especially from the dictionary, okay, I think ought to have that generosity to know that Heiner is doing his absolute best. He's doing way better than we would, most of us, if we were trying to do this in German, okay, or Norwegian, okay? So this openness to Heiner's understanding of these words, I think is necessary to get the full gist of what Heiner is saying. And if we apply that to the rest of us who are English speakers, the same phenomenon is still there, although probably not as strikingly, okay? So that's point number 1. Point number 2, I think I'd like to respond to Doug's question about icebergs, okay? Icebergs, yes, do hide much underneath the surface, but it's still very useful to pay attention to the tip. So the fact that these words are only the tip of an iceberg, you know, that hide much of what else is multidimensional, multifaceted, doesn't mean that they're useless. It really still means that they're quite useful. And so I just wanted to, you know, make that response to your offering earlier. The third is another one about being empty or open. I do believe, and I hold, that it is not necessary to be empty in order to be open. You can be open without being empty. And to me, that's a very useful distinction, okay? And then the last one is on this notion of safety. Safety is not strictly a property of the space. As you indicated, Doug, it's an interaction between individuals and the space that they're in. Some spaces are not safe for a particular individual if that particular individual is particularly sensitive and probably traumatized and not feeling that any space is safe. That's an extreme, of course. But then there's another case in which someone could be feeling safe no matter where they are. That's another extreme. So the interaction between individuals and their space together is a complex phenomenon that actually then determines whether that person, number 1, feels it's safe, or number 2, whether that space in any objective sense can be defined as safe. And that's a whole spectrum of things, okay? So I don't think it's at either end of those spectrums. So that's my 4 responses. And hopefully with that, I can go take a shower now.
Is Heiner next?
Later is next.
Yeah, you see, for me, space and place and frame are even more loaded words than map, because they are so differently understood in different cultures. And that is nearly all my work the last 30 years, how to come to common frames of references and really use space not as we use it in the Western cultures as potential, like Indian and China people say, it's breathing in and out. Also Goethe said this. This is then the real explanation why open is not empty. It is just a too narrow definition, and only by making it solid, T.S. Eliot always said, by really showing it in context, in applications, in situations, we can try on a long way to understand each other.
Video test, bookmark, Heiner, gem 3.
Your voice is off. You sound like
Oh
you.
no, I reset it. Let me fix it.
I like it.
You sound like a chipmunk.
It may have still worked. Hey, maybe if I could just get the switch, I could go for the frequency bookmark.
It's hard to get mad at that voice.
Well, welcome to the GCC, everybody. Love and rainbows.
I'll read Sam's text in the chat since it's silent. One more point responding to Barry. I just lost it. It just went off my screen. Differing definitions are not necessarily contradicting.
You're going to say something about that comment, Stacy?
No, I guess not, because he thanked me for reading it and he remarked that he's going into the shower. It's probably to save for later discussion, would be my guess.
Oh, okay.
My question is, does Sam actually keep listening in the shower like I do?
So Doug, one of the reasons that I wanted to bring this up first is because I thought it would be a way to get to discussing some of the other issues that have to do with doing conversations better instead of, rehashing the same ones. So to pivot a little bit, one of the other things that I noticed is that when things go off track, it's because people are defending themselves in some way. And I have to give you credit because, as I remarked yesterday, it does take some expertise, from a spiritual perspective, to not go into that default of explaining oneself and saying, no, I never said that. You got me wrong. I saw that happen today. I think I saw that happen today.
Yeah, it's that's about at least for me, transcending attachment. Right. So if I'm questioning into or unpacking or putting stuff into the center, it's coming from a place of in service to the fact of some of it, all of it, or none of it landing, like actually being received and understood. is not um, not relevant. It's reflective of what is by in between and in the space. And it triggers, for me, less inquiry into than self-reflection about, you know, what's another way of coming at it, or what's another way of approaching it, or not, what's another way of framing it. And the patterns of either reaction or deflection or diversion or negation on receipt are consistent. There are not an infinite number of varieties of those. And they're also not about me on a personal level, right? In other words, they're of and by the person on the responding or reacting side of the exchange. So deepening the question or the inquiry into that is always sort of a first go-to. But if that has been attempted and failed, which is also not unusual, like somebody not receiving, reacting adversely, negatively, deflecting, whatever, and then asking into what's living for them in doing that. And they're like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about that. Like, it's not about me. Then that sort of shuts down that line of inquiry. I'm not going to return to it or go back to it. Right. So it's at that point going into sort of stillness listening and waiting for insight or opportunity or opening to present itself, or for a new orientation or perspective to reveal itself. And that's in what Heiner was talking to about the concept of space. I'm not using that in a noun, as a noun, I'm using that as a verb. So if there's a conversational frame and there's 4 people in it, and there's 3 subjects, you know, 3 memes that are, you know, at work in it, and that conversation is a blocked, inert, adversarial, competitive thing, which is most conversations in our paradigm today are that. Who wins? Who's right? Space in that context is about expanding the frame, the contextual frame and orientation to allow and enable new, different perspective or orientation to emerge, given all the same ingredients of people, themes, and adversities and competition, right? It's stepping back from it to make the frame big enough to allow for a third possibility, which is end possibilities, right? It opens up the conversational dynamic to any one of a number of possible ways for the people involved to transcend their positions, their attachments, their, you know, sort of combat posture. And at least for me, that's the living nut. Like and it's a practice challenge. It's not a conceptual thing. It's not an idea thing. It's not a protocol thing. It's not a science math versus not science. It's not technology or not, and it's not it's not even in those realms. It's in a lived experiential, energetic shifting of catalyzing, enabling.
Yeah, can I just say that that is a really tough skill to develop, and I'm speaking for myself. I think I've gotten to a certain level, but it's hard, and you got to keep working on it. And I just want to point out publicly that Alex and Barry, I think did an amazing job of not responding to certain things yesterday. And I am really impressed, especially after having gone back and watched it a second time, where I was able to put myself in their shoes, as opposed to I was just viewing a whole big thing. So I was impressed. But I do want to say that is the skill that I think would be most helpful if we all developed within ourselves. And, one of the proposals I put in to take it away from the people, because we're all going to be at different skill levels, was to make sure that, if there was a disagreement or something, that person say, I'd like to discuss that at the end of the call. And just know that, that there would be a closing round where people would know they'd have an opportunity to say, by the way, Doug, that's not what I meant when I said that. I just meant this. I'm complete. And Colin's hand is up.
Yep. Colin?
And
Yes,
out.
thank you. Thank you. How's the sound check now? 1, 2, 3.
Better.
You sound like you.
All right. Well, I don't fit in every space, unfortunately, but I can. Just like I can adapt. And that's kind of the thing that I'm looking for, how to adapt when it's important, and you need to. Heiner's talking about, we're all talking about that. So yeah, it is about adapting when it's important. I challenge Doug a lot in trying to build a mind map. And Heiner says, well, that's not what map means to me. Well, okay, cognitive wayfinding with symbology. How's that? In an open space, starting blank. What they call that is a mind map. Now, in the past, mind maps were drawn on paper, but now they have the ability to do anything that software can do. So really, it's just navigation of information. And I like to say it's in the sense that Doug is talking about, because it's where you are coming into an open space and you don't have, you're open to generativity and you got a space to put it when it pops up. It's not like you're saying to somebody, excuse me, I got to finish this essay I'm writing. I've got the outline already and I'm going to fill it out, very clear direction on purpose, intent, bringing a lot of stuff to the table when you've got to fill in that essay that you're writing about what you know, and you're going to publish it. So if you're ready to do that, like Stacy was ready and had written a lot about what she was talking about, that she wasn't so sure she used the right words, she'd be a lot more sure she used the right words. So, that's what we're working on. I think honing the messages that are important. And so if people are triggering other people, that's a whole nother realm that I don't even really want to deal with, because that's not my forte. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for definitions. And if people don't like to be questioned, or I'm not questioning them properly, then that's what I got to work on. The approach, the explaining of the tool and its purpose and where it could be useful. I'm taking a lot for granted. And the trust I have in this group is not what I expected it was. And in as much, I don't think we can really expect anything unless there's some kind of a little agreement between people to do something. It's a nice, friendly, hopefully place to get to the bottom of things, whatever those things may be. It started out as global challenges. Anyway, I'm going on a long rant. So I'd like to make this part one of a continuing statement of the importance of appreciating that the mind maps are cognitive tools for exploring and understanding where we may have alignment and where our terms are different. And one simple example is they're just words. I don't mean and Heiner's right with, the words get in the way. Some people say the word straw man, steel man. Other people say the word adversary, enemy. There's all kinds of words, but what's the intent? What's important? What's going to come through? That's what's the iceberg I'm looking for. So if somebody's here to cause adversarial things, then that should be dealt with, and it should be dealt with in a way that it's not a stripping down or a shunning. The person's taken aside and saying, hey, what are you trying to do? That's what Heiner says. Like, what is it you're trying to do? So I talked to Heiner and I answered Heiner. We're in pretty good understanding. Same thing with everybody in this room. So I do think it is trying to get to that iceberg below, but in a sense-making way that's open, but not completely blank. And I could go on and talk about this for a long time because I've got visions of what this map looks like. And I also have the understanding that Stacy's talking about having time at the end to clarify anything that's missing. Well, that's where you put a bookmark on the map. Say, we need to clarify this. Is it important to us all? Or in Trello, doesn't matter. Is it actually important enough to make a bookmark for it and come back to it? I have several bookmarks on the map that we never got back to that we said, oh, this is important. Let's get back to this.
Can I take the
So
liberty
go ahead.
because
Sure.
you sort of got to a point and are starting to run past it.
I am.
Alex raised his hand, so I want to spread the well. Alex?
Yeah, I was thinking about the issue when complex things are introduced to the conversation where it could be expressed more simply. It causes agitation of the collaboration, of the coexistence. It's like putting sand in a machine when you should be putting in oil. So I think what the loving thoughts are the oil that helps this machine flow and run smoothly. So that's the intention. If the intention's coming from the heart, at the right place, I think you've got a bit of a more successful conversation with people with the intent to achieve what the outcome is they all desire. And that goes to my point. It's an arbitrary thing, but it's up to individuals to stand up for what they believe. I mean, this iceberg, if you have this awakening of spiritual judgment and humility to assist, to be of service to, and to help the increase the value of the conversation, then you've got humility. You've got the right, you're standing in the right place to achieve the result you're looking for. But if you're intentionally trying to disrupt and cause more complexity and diversion that upsets the conversation, it's criticizing other people's behavior because they're not the same as yours, then that's a negative thing. It shouldn't be encouraged, I don't believe. But we've got to put up with it because we're trying to coexist. So we act from, I'll finish on this note, I'll just try and be an example. And then there's a huge burden on one to do that because you have to look up to a higher place to find your drivers, the things that are going to give you the motivation to promote something that other people might not agree with. We're all different. We've all got our cultural aspects. And to respect another person's cultural aspect, I guess, is what prevents one from criticizing if they think they're using the wrong language. You're thinking that it's better to have the color and the diversity in the group than to have everybody talking the same and little robots all identical. That's no good. Don't want to go down that road. Anyway, I'll finish on that. Thank you.
So I've got a great sort of example I'd love to share. So I dealt with, in Gertrude's appreciators method, I dealt with my trigger around Trump.
What was the word?
Trigger around Trump.
Trump, not
Yeah.
trust, Trump. Okay.
Trump. And in dealing with it, what I did was I neutralized the trigger. So I shifted myself to neutral. I didn't close the deal though, because that didn't necessarily mean that I let go of judgments.
Judgments.
Is my voice soft? Am I coming through soft? I
No, it's
can
good.
turn up the mic.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Barry's
so-
running too much equipment, maybe. I don't know.
So I sort of finished that work recently in terms of swinging fully to curiosity and pulling back, that space thing I was talking about, pulling back far enough to include in understanding and frame and perspective that 74 million person polarized, political group in the United States, right? And where I finally got to was, and it was in the context of a conversation, a conversation in another context, was, my assertion that all of the systems and structures of the industrial revolution frame are breaking down. Everything's breaking down. Politics breaking down. Government breaking down. Education system breaking down. Organized religions breaking down. Financial system breaking down. Currencies breaking down. All of these things are sort of getting a little wobbly at the knees on a global basis. And within the frame and context of political systems failing, the message of the extreme right Republican Trump following demographic, if you drop like a little bit below or pull far enough back and out from the surface politics to the experiential dimension of what they're saying, they're not just rejecting lefties, snowflakes, Democrats. They're rejecting Democrats, they're rejecting Republicans, they're rejecting democracy, they're rejecting the system, the whole kit and caboodle. And within the frame of this progressive growing gap between the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots getting more screwed, more exploited, more taken advantage of with greater and greater calculus and dispassion and lack of empathy. They're saying, fuck you, we've had enough. Like, we're not going to take it anymore. And through that lens, that big, if you pull back and have that big enough lens, they're not wrong. Like, I understand that. I understand that. The government's been doing it to the population, the economic system, financial world has been doing it to the little people like forever. going back to, the first emergences of kingdoms and, the people all of a sudden having to pay rent for the land that, the blink before they owned. So that's understandable. If I'm open enough, curious enough, willing to think into, feel into what's the real essential truth that they're experiencing on a lived basis that would provide the foundation for what they're saying and doing. Not get hung up on what they're saying and doing, but get underneath and behind that to what's the driver for what they're saying and doing. What's the experiential, emotional, spiritual reality and truth? And at that level of inquiry, at that level of interest and care to understand, we're all connected. And if we're all in service to each other, then that's about asking what's needed. That's about inquiring into how to help. And on that level, if you feel into that, think into that, there's nothing political, there's nothing intellectual, there's nothing conceptual, there's nothing, argument-wise that's relevant. Like, what do you need? What do you need? And out of the need, the fact that there are people willing to, identify the need and then double down and take advantage of it and feed it with fear and feed it with hate and feed it with false flags and feed it with, I'll sell you a gun. But the truth of the matter is that notwithstanding all of the charlatans and all of the hustlers taking advantage, there are real needs. And who's speaking to those? Who's addressing those? And the same thing applies in its own way to the conversations here.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Sente, Barry.
I wrote down what I think I heard you say, which is something that my friend Rob Cancer said. Don't pay so much attention to the actual rhetoric, the actual utterances. Inquire into what are the underlying emotions, what are the unmet needs, and the unarticulated requests. Did I get that right?
Yeah, well, yeah, essentially, yeah.
Did you say unarticulated or something else?
Or unappreciated requests, maybe I should say. Unacknowledged. Unresponded to.
It's needs. It's really on a needs level, on a felt sense, experiential, existence and survival level, and truly existential level. What are the needs?
So the interesting thing about that, which is what I've seen in, GCC discussions, which let me just say, there's a bond here. There's a friendship. I don't think I'm just speaking for myself. Maybe everybody doesn't feel that to the same degree, but in a sense, this is like a family. With that being said, because we do this in families too, and I'm not saying this is the way we should behave. I'm not saying this is our better selves. But what often happens is we recognize a need, and instead of giving somebody the medicine that they need, we kind of break them further, thinking that that's going to teach them, and it doesn't. You know, it's interesting how that works. We wouldn't do that to our children. I know that. Although actually,
Maybe,
I take that back.
maybe.
You're right. There are some people that, because of where they're evolved, you know, the point that they're at consciously, they do that to their children. But
Absolutely.
nobody would want to do that to their children if they really were aware of what they were doing. Let me say it like that.
Yes, and Stacy, sorry to interrupt, but I feel that me punching back is feeling that projected upon me. Whether I threw the first punch or not, I don't know, but I didn't intend to. So that is a big point. And I alluded to it earlier, like, and yesterday you alluded to it, that I'll say that you showed, you wanted to acknowledge Barry and Alex for not biting on my triggers that I'm putting out there. And it's kind of unresolved, and definitely, like Alex says, look beyond ourselves to the higher meaning. Some people say power. I'll say higher meaning, more important meaning. I always say it's not about me, because it's not about me promoting what I have. It's like, does my idea help? I'm already doing a whole bunch of stuff, right? The GCC is like a bit of a family to me. I don't come down to the kitchen table and say, everybody, you know, you must know everything about what I'm doing. I'm saying, I'm off to work. You know, do you need a drive? This kind of thing. So when I'm in the banter, I'm kind of, you know, throwing out some stuff that I'm doing in the day on my way out, where some people judge me as if this is my job. And so, you know, I could do a lot better to prepare. I take that criticism well, and I give that criticism, and I am. But the deal is that, you know, I don't feel like a hypocrite because I'm trying. And explicitly, if we could find a way to put the water under the bridge so that these things aren't brought up again, that's what an apology is supposed to be. I don't hear a lot of apologies. I think there should be some. You know, I've apologized to Sam for sending stuff mistakenly, unedited, you know, and he still remembers that. That's a score against me. You know, I apologized for it. Does it matter? I don't know. Does he think I'm sincere? I think he does. But with Doug, I don't have that relationship. And he blew up at me a couple, and, you know, I don't know if Sam saw that and wants to bring Doug into barn raising, blow up conflict resolution or not. But there's definitely stuff that's underneath, and I would rather deal with it personally and then come back with good results to share with the group, showing how we can resolve differences, as opposed to trying to fight it out here or gish galloping at the end of shows and really pissing and triggering people, because that's not cool. And I don't know if people know that that's happening. So it's like, if I could acknowledge that, hey, I feel this way because of this, this, and this, and everybody can say, oh, well, baby boohoo, you know, whatever. Or they can say, I care about that. Let's clear that up. Let's steel man what you feel that you perceived, instead of assuming that somebody is out to cause trouble. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. I hope that lands properly, because I'm not here to cause fights. I'm here for understanding. And I put in the side what I think everybody's here for. You guys can clear it up. You know, you might be here for 10 reasons, so you get 10 journey maps. Right?
Colin, if I could just jump in for a second, because I just want to suggest that sometimes people aren't even aware of some of the things that they're doing. And one of the things that I'd like to do, and I was going to talk to Sam later, and I mentioned a little bit to Barry, I would like to have an unrecorded call where we review yesterday's barn raising. I'd like to moderate that. I was going to ask you guys about it later, because I think there's a lot to learn. You know, I mean, like I said, I saw something in me that I hadn't noticed before. I saw things in other people too. And I think that there's a way of learning that doesn't have to be embarrassing. And
Sam has set that up in Zulip already.
okay.
Basically, yeah,
Okay.
you just,
Stop,
every
stop,
video's
stop
there.
right now. Stop right now, because I want to point something out that you sometimes do, and I'm feeling it now. Whatever Sam did in Zulip has nothing to do with the request that I'm making now. Now, if we want to link it up together at another time, that's fine. But right now, I'm making a request that anybody interested in joining me, I would like to have a session unrecorded or privately recorded just for us, however you want to do it, where we take a look at things, because there are things that I would like to highlight without blaming somebody, just to be able to look at examples of when certain things happen, because we're not always conscious of everything we do. We'd be superhuman if we could do that.
I appreciate that, Stacy. I'm not trying to divert your plans. I also have fiddled with the idea, and we may have spoken about it. I spoke with Lauren about it a long time ago. I've spoken to Bebe about it. I've spoken to a lot of people about retrospective videos, but all
Right.
I've done so far is pull out a few gems. So I do get what you're talking about, but the low hanging fruit 80-20 for me is just to get in there down and dirty into Zulip and just say, hey, this video, this timestamp, what the hell's going on here? Can we talk about it?
Then go for it.
Yeah, well, that's what's happening in Zulip. I hope that happens, because, and then if there's a big topic to go over, like how do we know what? I might suggest a more important video than the one you had. So do we make an RFC for videos to do retrospectives? So yeah, I'm not against what you're saying at all. In fact, I think it is very important to go back. And Doug has a different impression of going back. And I don't think it conflicts with what I'm talking about. So if I say it, I don't think what I'm thinking about would conflict with Doug's values, but my words conflict with Doug's words. So how can I say that I think looking back at these videos is very important? And how does
so let me take that statement and say to you, the way to find out whether something conflicts with somebody else is to ask them. Now, the phenomena, Colin, of you that is consistent is that you throw those kinds of things out. You are never interested in inquiring into or asking whether the person you're invoking is aligned and agrees with the story or representation you've made.
Give me an example of that.
Well, you just did it.
When you just, can I do that, please?
No,
Yeah, absolutely.
you interrupted me. You interrupted me. How do you know my next statement was?
Colin,
What do
here's
you
an
have to
example.
say?
Colin,
I have several of those on
Colin,
YouTube.
do you want to hear the example? The example is, I know that what I want to do doesn't align with Doug's understanding, and I'm paraphrasing.
No, his
because I don't
words,
remember. Okay, but you're saying, I know that. Why not just say to Doug, Doug, does it go against, or do you, or I'm under the impression that this goes against something that you believe. Is that true?
I appreciate that. And how do you know that, like other posts that I have, what do you have to say about this, Doug? What do you think, Doug? You know, I tag Doug. That's basically
But right
asking
now,
for
in
a
this
comment.
moment we're talking about right now.
Hey, I was
this-
in the middle of writing the post, and Doug says, "Hold, but let me interrupt." And I say, like, "What do you think, Doug? Like, do you?" I come to Doug all the time. I say, "Doug, what do you think of the word X?" I do that all the time.
Be here now.
I am. Like, we talked about the word enemy, and then I went to adversary, and he said no. Now he coming back with infidel. Now infidels exist, so enemies don't exist for Doug. Adversaries don't exist for Doug, but infidels do. How do you play with that? So I'm saying, well, what do you mean behind it?
Actually, none of those statements are true.
Okay, well, I think we can go back. Well, actually, we can't. I don't know if we have.
None of those statements are true.
Well, I'm open for you to correct them.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. There's no ask on the front end. There's attempt to draw in, to engage people along the way, but there's never been an ask at the front end whether they want to play. And I can just tell you in absolute terms, I have no interest in playing in the way you're framing the setup.
That I know.
It's a projection and construction of yours that has
it's a mind
Zero, no, it's not a mind map.
It's what
a-
it wants to be.
It's a whole world.
Understanding journey.
Colin, it's a whole world of yours.
No, I'm trying
Okay.
to open up. I'm trying to open up to the community. That's why I'm not mind mapping, because
Well, you know what Yoda says about trying.
well, it's still
It
happening.
gets
It's
you
a
a lot
long-term.
to try. No, yeah, no, but it gets you a lot of trying. I don't see a lot of opening.
Well, hold on
I'm
now. That's
offering,
fine.
I'm offering to you information. I'm offering to you information that I think is in service to potentially helping you shift out of trying and into actually potentially getting what you say you want.
That sounds great.
That is information you can elect to hear and think about and process and take in and evaluate, or not. I've got no projection or attachment to this. But when I say to you, ask permission, ask for consent first. At the beginning, before you get on a roll, involving other people, that would be a pretty big step in the right direction. You can do with what you will with that. But none of the representations, characterizations, invocations, or inquiries you have directed at me have I ever agreed with or agreed to engage
Well, hold on. Let me just
with,
interrupt.
or
I have an example.
or agreed to respond to, or agreed with substantively ever. And that's a pretty long time frame for that statement, for me to make that statement. And that happens to be my reality. And I want to make sure not to get into tennis match here. Barry has his hand up. Barry.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna put it in the chat in the meantime. One of the challenges that I find is how to express dissent. Absence of consent is dissent. Now, one can think of lots of ways to express dissent verbally, orally, in writing. The very first time in my life that I ever non-verbally expressed dissent, I did it by rolling my eyes. I was a child. Actually, I have it backwards. My brother rolled his eyes at me. He expressed dissent by rolling his eyes at me, and I observed it. I had no idea what the gesture meant, and I raised it to my father, and I said, "Tell me what that means." My father wouldn't tell me what it meant. But I'm thinking here on Zoom with these kind of little postage stamp gallery, if I wanted to express dissent silently, kind of nicely by rolling my eyes, would it be effective? Would it be noticed and understood, interpreted, and reacted to appropriately? Or would some other more energetic method of expressing dissent be required? For example, that, or that, or that, or whatever. You can express dissent in a lot of ways, of which my challenge is find one that's socially acceptable, not considered violent, and works. And I want to add one thing that Doug may not know, because both Doug and Sam have defined elements that they define as examples of violent communication. And the one that Sam mentioned, I don't know, it was yesterday or last week, that he considers abandonment an instance of violence. And I kind of startled with that because I had never thought of it that way. And Doug had talked about, if you're attached to something that triggers you, Buddha says detach. Attachment's root of suffering. If you don't want to suffer, detach. And I thought, well, detachment is kind of a synonym of abandonment. And in fact, Buddha literally abandoned his family. Buddha thought about suffering, concluded or hypothesized that attachment was the root of suffering, and got up and walked away from his home, his wife, his child, and went to live in the outside world. And he literally abandoned his family. And that was his teaching. So I'm kind of in this kind of, I won't say neurotic, but kind of perplexed state of trying to sort out these alternatives to expressing dissent, and whether detachment or abandonment or voting with your feet, walking away, rolling your eyes, raising your voice, writing a song parody. There's lots of ways to express an alternative, non-consensual state. And I'm really stuck. I don't know a good one that is socially acceptable and effective.
Stacy?
You bring up an interesting point, Barry. So yesterday, somebody on the call made the comment as they started to speak, they said, mine is more general. And then they said, they stopped themselves and they said, no, those are fighting words. And I marked it down because I thought it was worthy of discussing. Why should saying that my comments are a little different, they're more general, why would anybody think those are fighting words? I think there's something to be explored there. I'm complete. I just wanted to bring it up.
I think that's touching on projection. Like if somebody is broadening a projection, it's a way of increasing the projection, imposition, power over authority, all of that stuff. So those two things organically in my mind, if they were going together, then saying more generally, somebody catching themselves going, okay, I'm expanding my footprint here, my projected footprint here. For me, somebody going to you, somebody going to us is the same kind of deal. Purporting to speak for more than themselves is hugely projective.
If I could just jump in, Colin, before Colin goes, I just want to say my reason for bringing it up is that I agree with what you're saying. My reason for bringing it up is that if we can look at these things, it will help to bring awareness in ourselves. And that's, it's not to shame anybody or to say I disagree. It's to say, let's look at these things because they happen all the time.
Absolutely. Colin?
Yes. I lost the last word of a sentence I'm trying to type. Does that mean I don't know what I was trying to type? I don't think so, but that happens. So there's kind of like three fronts that Doug mentioned in his last share, with directed, I think, towards me somewhat. And it's about overall, the message is, how are you going to get positive generative value flowing, as opposed to not being able to get something valuable flowing as it stands still? Or not, how do you get people interested in you? And so that's one. Another one is choosing the way you present an idea. I am not a hypocrite. At least I don't want to be. And I do preach about steel manning. And that means giving the person the opportunity to change their mind with holding them to what they just said. Like, you can say, is that what you meant? And that Stacy already mentioned that today. Like, from what I hear you saying is this, is that what you meant? That's kind of what I'm saying. So I'm hoping that I don't have to go through the formal unpacking of it, and you would give me the trust to know that I'm coming from that framework of trying to investigate, and I'm willing to playfully take dissent if you disagree with me. Playfully, yes. Like, no, Colin, you don't understand what I'm talking about. Like, think about when you come into the meeting, don't bring anything with you, because that just manipulates the generative possibilities. Now, I'm quoting you again. Maybe you've changed your mind again. I can ask you if you still believe that. I have to assume that my ears work, but I'm not assuming that I know your state of mind, because it can change. Or like Stacy, you could have used a word and I took it the wrong way. It's very clear when you say somebody puts a gun to my head, they're not my enemy. And I said, well, name
I'll have chocolate.
chocolate. So
I'll have chocolate.
okay, good point. So in asking,
No. I want you to, like, does that beg the question? In what context is that coming from? Like, where did that just come from?
well, it comes from the fact that if one wants to be clear what the other person is saying, they have to actually mention what was said.
So you just mentioned something that I said in a context that has no correlation to this context.
Right. I would love to know what that context is.
Invoked it in a vacuum.
No.
Without any framing or orientation. And
Yes.
that is about as constructive, meaningful, valuable, contributive, and inclusive as me saying, I'll have chocolate, because that was the question that was raised at the table at dinner in a restaurant 4 weeks ago.
What does that have to do with me understanding what you mean?
You just did that with me. You attributed something that I said. No
Yes.
context, no frame, no.
It was in the frame of me understanding what you mean. So you can add the context.
But 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 6 people in the present Sunday unblocking.
They were probably there
context,
then
frame,
too.
and orientation. Well, actually, no, because that statement was in a one-on-one with you.
No, it wasn't. No,
Yes,
it wasn't. Not at all. No,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
I haven't had a one-on-one with you in a long time.
So this is why I refuse to play.
Well, that's fine. If we don't have the tape, we can't go back. And I don't care to
This
pick hairs.
this is why I refuse to play, because the statement you made about you're being interested, you're being curious, you're being open, it's impossible to make that statement and align it with the fact of the way you relate, interact, and behave, and never asking a question. You can't be in curiosity and never ask a question. These things are cognitively, intuitively, intellectually irreconcilable.
I appreciate that, Doug. And I would hope that I'm not being an asshole, like Sam would say. That's on the spreadsheet. That's somebody asking for something when they don't actually want it. I actually take the effort.
That's a phenomena. That's a phenomena that, at least for me, I consistently experience.
I know, that's why I brought it up, and that's steel manning. So, and I could ask you, is that what you think of me? But the point of the matter is,
no, that's what I experience with you.
The point of the matter is, there is a very valuable space for our opinions and our boundaries and our desires. And I have to ask questions. And if people change their mind, then what I put last year might be invalidated. So yeah, a mind map can get stale, but we are in that cognitive space where we're trying to align and understand each other. So when I ask you questions, Doug, please understand, I'm not asking for no reason at all, right? Why was it important to me to know if you have enemies? That's because you blocked me when I was talking and saying, whoa, stop talking about enemies. There's no enemy talk in this room or something. I don't know. But you challenged me. And so I said to you, well, Doug, don't you have enemies? And you said, no, I don't think I do. And so the next week I came back. I thought about that because I cared.
I didn't say I don't think I do.
I don't know. That's fine. For the record,
this whole reality, Colin, is yours. I want you to get.
That's why we need a map, so it's not mine. And that's why I want to do it in the group. And that's why I think the asks could be delivered better, so that we don't run into these problems.
The need for you to understand your scope of awareness and authority as yours, it not projecting or applying to other human beings. It's yours. If you own it,
Yes, I
that's,
do.
that's fine. And you're
I own my
entitled-
confusion.
And you're entitled to have.
Will
all
you
the
help me
confusion
separate
in
the
world.
confusion? Will you help me fix that confusion by giving me answers to definitions, or at least the reason why there is no word? And, you know, and it is difficult because I don't think
I
and
get that.
we can't play unless the intent is that nobody's trying to game the other person. And I resent the fact you think I'm trying to game you or cause trouble. And Alex, I'm not here to cause trouble, right? And I don't think you think I am anymore. I can ask you, Alex, do you think I'm here to cause trouble still? Or do you think me not being on camera is something that's causing trouble? You know, or do I get to show up? Like, I could be blind. The next person that shows up to this meeting could be blind, right? So they turn their camera on, but they can't see you.
You need to be accurate about the statements you're making, because it's just as wrong as typing, sloppy typing and sloppy spelling, and then correcting yourself and telling others that's what they need to do. It's where they need to focus their abilities on being accurate and being honest.
I agree, and we should focus on those things and where it's important. And I think Doug is trying to focus on that. And I'll give back to Doug. My question to you is if we have any problems in this group, or Barry or anybody else, we should be able to discuss them and not assume that I'm trying to win, as Doug says, because there's nothing for me to win here. There is no right. There's what we can generate. I believe that with what Doug's saying. It's just like Sam, I think that I like to bring a little bit into the room. So how do we characterize that? Well, what you have is okay. It's been checked out and it's not going to contaminate the conversation. Doug and I have had a private conversation. I will not talk about that, other than he's given me examples of what he feels when people do try to bring things into the conversation. Because this is something that's an ongoing thing that I'm trying to understand the boundaries of, like the 100% present, 100% trust, you know, and this is Doug's way in this space. Is that the way we're all to conduct ourselves? Well, if you're on a one-on-one with Doug, you have to realize that. And I think that's the point we're trying to make, like how to adapt to each other. Whereas when I'm talking to Alex, I might take on a different mode of communication about different topics. Anyway, I'm done with that. And I hope that that can bury the call and ask whole terminology red herring, because there is a place for these things and it does matter if we're going to talk about it. And if you want to challenge me on what I say, I'm more than open to it. You want to interrupt me, go ahead. I'll try not to interrupt anybody else unnecessarily, unless I feel like I'm being pushed on, which I think was the last time when Sam says, Colin, you're interrupting, Colin, you're interrupting, when I was talking with Doug. That's because Doug was projecting on me. And he was asking rhetorical questions that I thought were real questions. And in the end, you know, we went down that road, but it's not important because I trust Doug's intentions. So like, Alex, I want to look higher, away from the noise. What can we do? If I was mistaken, sorry. I have Neapolitan as well, if you want some, Doug.
That's an opportunity to apologise if you feel it's necessary. But if you've just been annoying someone and then expecting them to apologise to you for getting upset about it, that's a misdemeanor. That's a straw manning or something like that. I forget. But
I think you're defining the space, what's appropriate and what's not, which is behavior, which is a big point. Different spaces, different behavior. The I-we conversation, right? That's a big one.
Barry?
At 38 minutes after the hour, I jotted down that Colin expressed feelings of resentment, but what I missed was the direct object of the verb I resent. And so my question is, what is it that Colin was resenting? What is the direct object of the I have feelings of resentment about?
Yeah.
I didn't get the direct object. I'm sorry. He might have said it, I just didn't catch it.
It's all about misunderstanding, because the umbrella word for me here is understanding. And that's why I use maps.
I resent understanding doesn't make sense.
I resent misunderstanding. between
Resent-
people that doesn't get clear. Like Stacy said, she had a beautiful idea to help that. Like, let's make sure there's a little space at the end so someone doesn't get gish galloped, where they get a whole bunch of points made, and then, okay, see you tomorrow. It's like there's no place for the person to be, and there's also consent in the room of whether that conversation, if the people actually want to have that conversation. I try to look for that too. So it's not having the right consent structure in the framework that can happen. It's also not having the right channels to finish and continue conversations that feel like they're not finished in the aspect that Stacy was speaking of. Like, let's not take the time now, but when can we discuss that later? Especially when it's conflict, I would like to do it offline. And Barry is not asleep. Good.
I'm waiting to ask Stacy. Stacy, did you catch the direct object that I missed? Can you complete the sentence? Colin resents direct object.
Yes, but I also want to make a suggestion, not just for you, but in general. A better way to have asked that question would be, Colin, I heard you say represent, but I missed the object. What is it exactly that you resent? And what I heard Colin say was, I resent when I feel misunderstood. Is that accurate,
Bingo.
Colin?
Bingo, bingo, bingo. Not just me, but the whole group.
Let's just break it down into smaller bites. So I suggest we ask the person that we have the question about, and I suggest that the person just answer as succinctly as possible, like you just did, Colin, and start practicing that.
Let me just make sure that I got this. Colin resents being misunderstood or feeling misunderstood. Which?
To him, they're both the same. To us, it may be different.
Sorry, I am listening. I have wireless headphones, but I was away from the terminal. I guess that's why I'm pointing towards fair conversations, because that's a positive direction. Like Doug was saying, okay, so whine, you feel misunderstood. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, how about a mind map and define our terms? You know, if it's important.
So the answer to Barry's question is feel misunderstood.
He resents being misunderstood. Is that correct?
Being or feeling misunderstood?
Either one or both.
I think it's in dysfunctional channels where misunderstanding is
Being
easy.
or feeling misunderstood. It's the one of pick A or
Being or
B.
feeling. I don't see like Stacy, I don't see a distinction.
No,
Okay,
not
so
like
they did. So
Stacy. Wait.
Stacy got it right. For you, both of those are equal.
For him, right.
Feeling or being.
Yeah.
Colin, I want to make that distinction. What I said about it being the same, I meant that I think for you, it's the same. For
Yes.
me, it is not the same, but I just want to
Well,
make that.
they're not, they overlap, put it that way.
Sometimes, yes, that I can agree with. Sometimes they overlap.
So can I ask you, what's the feeling part of that? Like when you are in that place, how do you feel? What's the feeling level of that?
Hello, am I on?
Yeah. we
Are
can-
you- Yeah.
Oh, good. Spacebar works. First time I used it. Fresh coffee. I am feeling that the space is not conforming to the conversation in this particular.
No. But I'm asking you
The
about
the framing is wrong. Framing.
Your feelings.
Well,
What do you feel as Colin when you are feeling misunderstood? What's the feeling that goes with that?
Well, that's context related, but I would say generally overall, it's a feeling of related to the level of importance. So the more important it is to be understood, as Barry would say, when there's actual danger at hand, he'll actually scream to not be misunderstood.
Wait. I'm not asking about Barry. So
Well, I'm just saying it depends.
What is your feeling? What
I guess
do
the
you
feeling-
feel like when you feel like you are being misunderstood? What's the
Okay.
feeling that comes up?
The word I come up with is kind of useful. I feel blocked for whatever reason. And if it's important, I might feel all kinds of different emotions. And if it's
So-
not, it's like, forget about it.
So happy, sad, angry, afraid.
I think you're asking, what color is color?
Well, I'm just asking to dial it in. Which of the four?
Well, give me an example, I guess I'm saying. Like, give me an example of when I asked for something that I didn't want to receive, that I wasn't being manipulated, or, that was genuinely being offered.
I can't, Colin,
Okay,
I don't have the energy or the interest in going down
Okay.
rabbit holes. I'm asking
Okay.
a really specific question. I'd like you to close your eyes, take a deep breath,
yeah.
and just
Coffee.
allow yourself to receive the question, do a check-in inside, and come back with, as best you can,
Okay.
an
How did I
emotional,
feel?
your emotional experience when you feel unheard.
Okay. Well, recently there's a big one between me and you.
Wait. I'm not asking for the story of or the history.
Oh, no.
In
You said
connection
you
with
said you
who
gotta
or
have
what.
you.
What is
Oh.
the feeling you have when you feel misunderstood in any context with anybody?
No, what color is
ever?
color? That's what color is color. Like,
Okay,
in misunderstanding with you,
I just
I
want to
have
be
a specific
clear.
example.
I just want to be clear. You are not willing to answer the question I'm asking.
I answered. You're asking a question to me that sounds like, what color is color? You see these kinds of questions between atheists and religious people all the time that are just, they're just misframed questions. I would say that when you were yelling at me and I felt blocked the other week, and you were saying, do you realize how angry you are making me right now? And you point to your face and you're yelling at me with all the people present. I'm feeling that's quite immature. I'm feeling attacked.
Right. Yeah. I get all that.
And I'm feeling attacked. I'm feeling attacked by somebody who's not being, that's a rare thing for you, Doug. That's rare for you, Doug.
I understand.
You said that. And but I think it's one of those iceberg things, right? And so how do I feel when I run into your iceberg?
Okay,
well,
so hang on. Barry has his hand up. I'd like to give him.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, Doug is trying to get the answer to this question. What came to mind are 4 candidate possibilities that come to my mind. I don't know if any of them are correct, but I'll just nominate them as possible words. Maybe frustration is the feeling. Maybe disappointment is the feeling. Maybe exasperation is the feeling. Maybe despair is the feeling. Those are 4 possible candidates that somebody might nominate as the answer to Doug's question. I don't know if they apply to Colin, but I'm just nominating 4 possibilities.
And disrespected a lot of times too, because do you care? If you don't care, I feel you disrespect me.
Feeling uncared for.
Well, no, disrespected. And you could, for whatever reason, they might care, or they might not care.
Feeling unattended.
Or shunned.
So the challenge, Barry,
the
challenge I have, Barry, with what you're doing and the way Colin's responding is, again, Colin doesn't own any of your responses.
No, I do. I agree with all of them. All the ones he said.
So
I do feel frustrated. I do feel, and more. I added more.
So all of those and some more. So feeling disrespected, feeling shunned, feeling I lost one. I did write it down.
And the worst is inconsequential.
Is being what?
If you're inconsequential.
Feeling inconsequential, feeling unworthy, maybe.
Whatever. It's just that's what vibes you get from the person. Then you say, well, gee, where do they go on my trust graph now? I don't trust them as much as I did before. So they go down on your trust graph. Remember the trust graph from last week?
I don't remember seeing a trust graph. Maybe I wasn't.
Well, we were talking about it, but I put it on Zulip because we talked about it last week. And it's
I don't see a lot of stuff on Zulip. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Sam's talking about it. It's simple. It's a simple concept. The real interesting question is where you start with somebody that you don't know on the trust graph. And that's what Duggan was getting to, as opposed to analyzing me using a trust graph in the first place, which was interesting.
Feeling untrusted.
Well, no. So when you meet somebody, I don't want to take this away, but when you meet somebody, where do you put them on a scale of 1 to 100 as far as trust? And Kayla says, she doesn't let just anybody bring her a coffee. So I don't even know if that's the same trust that Doug's talking about. And I could ask Doug, but I would think that was derailing. And I did ask it in Zula, so we can follow up on the conversation there or not.
So any and all and even more specific feelings.
I think it's,
How to go into this
I think in this
basket.
group, we can just say disrespected, and that should be enough.
You feel disrespected. Especially disrespected. Is that correct?
That's what I hear.
Okay, that's interesting.
And it's actually there's ideas and then the person. And above all, I'm here because I have a belief that even though I may not be getting the influence or getting the reactions I want, I know I'm getting feedback, and it is way that I can align to be better, because I do think that people are here to show care and concern. And when someone says they don't care, that's when my trigger goes up and says, okay, there's somebody who's not caring. And if I show that I'm not caring, that's not good. So that's why I might not want to listen to somebody, but at the same time, if they come to this group, I'm going to treat them with all the respect of anybody else, because that's fair. I'm not going to shun somebody. I may try not to work with him. Like Doug says, he's not going to, he's not going to be aligning with me while he thinks when he asks questions, I don't give him the answer he wants. But sometimes the questions he asks don't really fit in my frame. So I back up and I look, how can we reframe this? And Doug says, no, you don't get to reframe this on me. I'm redoing the reframing. Same thing with Barry. No, you don't get to bring in your journey. Now, this is all just my head. This isn't necessarily what happened. But, I'm coming to Barry. How can we put your great work on emotions and things that you've thought about for years? And, you could probably pinpoint some of the things I'm saying and say, oh, that would be good. Why don't you do this and that and this? As opposed to going into a lecture where Barry's explaining to me all of his work. Both are interesting, but have we got the conversation framed properly? And that you can back up again to my GCC concern on, especially in barn raising, where we can choose different frames for different days. I like that experimenting. Here and in Gertrude's, not so much, but that's okay because it's focused, and I feel that Doug has genuine concern. I feel that it's unbelievably unconditional, and it shouldn't be wasted. So he wrote a book, and I think that we should be promoting and understanding where his gifts are. And if I'm asking questions and I'm perceived as an infidel, then if I ask you what color ice cream you ask, you're going to say charcoal, like go away from me. So it really does matter. And I do see that you do get a stigma. And so one person can say something and it's interpreted completely different than if somebody else says it. But that's fine.
So I've got to jump in because we've got 4 minutes to a hard stop for me. And I just want to open the room to closing thoughts before we check in. And Colin, if I can, yours was yours. And we've got, each person has a minute, basically. Hello?
Sorry if I stepped
Barry?
on anybody's time.
Not at all. Barry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll close with a story that I have known ever since my childhood. And it's a story about feeling disrespected. It's a very old story and a very powerful story in the culture about being disrespected. A story about two brothers, and each brother brings their contribution forward. And one brother's contribution is respected and admired, and the other brother's contribution is disrespected. And the brother whose contribution is disrespected feels jealous and envious of his brother. And a tragedy ensues. I'll stop there.
Stacy, anything in closing?
I actually thought this was kind of productive in a way that I haven't seen. I don't know if anybody else agrees. And I'm looking forward to more conversations.
Alex?
It's constructive to deep dive into some aspects of the psychology surrounding the human interactions, but it's also enlightening to find the simplicity that you loved and favoured is reaffirming your beliefs that you're on the right path. Over.
Sam, you here? You're not here? I'm not sure. You're here.
I found it very hard to follow when there's a lot of interruptions and ping-ponging with incomplete sentences and thoughts flying all over the place. So that's my impression of the last half hour or so. So no closing thoughts.
So Stacy, I sort of share your take. I think we were tickling some stuff here that was fresh earth. And I'd love to, if it's possible, to pick up the thread where we're leaving off. I'd love to do that. And I think sort of the breathing space of the week between is also sort of perfect. And so I look forward to picking up the thread if the collective will is inclined to go with that and do that.
Well, I'm really, I just want to add, I'm really hoping, and I will set up a time with Sam. I want to create another space to continue this. I'd like to moderate. It's something I'd like to do, bring things in. So.
Okay, well, I'll keep an eye open for the movement of that.
Invite you.
If I have an opening, I'm certainly game to be there. Thank you all and have a great week.